The Grand Assembly of the Galactic Defense Council buzzed with nervous energy as Admiral John Wade stood before the curved wall of observation windows. Beyond the reinforced transparent steel, a small green sphere floated in the void, an unremarkable test asteroid that would soon become anything but ordinary. Distinguished representatives, Zhang began, her voice carrying across the chamber. For centuries, you've regarded Earth's defensive capabilities as primitive. Today, that perception changes. She gestured to the seemingly empty space around the asteroid. What you see, or rather, what you don't see, is humanity's contribution to galactic defense. The Arxer delegate, General Kex, clicked his mandibles in barely concealed disdain. His species had dominated military technology for millennia with their quantum phase weaponry. Admiral, we were promised a weapons demonstration. All I see is a rock and empty space. Zhang smiled. The demonstration began 20 minutes ago. She tapped her datapad, and the chamber's holographic displays sprang to life, revealing what the naked eye couldn't see. Surrounding the asteroid was a cloud of microscopic particles, each one smaller than a grain of pollen. We call it the Garden Defense System, Zhang continued. Each particle contains modified extremophile bacteria originally developed for terraforming. When activated, she pressed another control. The effect was immediate and mesmerizing. The cloud of particles began to glow with a soft bioluminescent light. As the council watched, the bacteria started to multiply exponentially, forming intricate geometric patterns in space. Within minutes, a living lattice of interconnected biological material surrounded the asteroid. Impossible, breathed Dr. Engstthal, the Centaurian chief scientist. Organic matter cannot propagate in vacuum. Conventional organic matter can't, Zhang corrected. But these bacteria were engineered from organisms found in Earth's deep-sea thermal vents. We modify them to survive in space by forming interconnected colonies that share resources and protect each other from radiation. A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber. The Arxer general's earlier disdain had transformed into intense focus. "And this is a weapon?" he asked. "A defensive one," Zhang replied. "Allow me to demonstrate." She nodded to her technical team. "Launch the test projectile." A small missile streaked from a nearby platform toward the asteroid. As it approached the bacterial lattice, something remarkable happened. The biological network responded instantly, thickening and reorganizing itself. The missile impacted the living shield and disappeared. "The bacteria don't just block attacks," Zhang explained as gasps echoed through the chamber. "They consume them. The Garden Defense System breaks down any matter or energy that contacts it, using the absorbed resources to strengthen itself. The more you attack it, the stronger it becomes." Dr. Engstthal had moved to a sensor console, his appendages flying over the controls. "The missile. It's being completely deconstructed at the molecular level. The bacteria are somehow accelerating its atomic decay." "Correct," Zhang said. "We discovered this capability by accident. The bacteria were originally designed to break down toxic compounds in soil during terraforming. We simply helped them evolve to process more complex materials." The Arxer general stood, his massive frame casting a shadow across the chamber floor. "You weaponized terraforming technology." For the first time, there was respect in his voice. "While we focused on building better weapons, you turned life itself into a shield." Zhang nodded. "Humanity's greatest strength has never been our ability to destroy. It's our ability to adapt, to take something designed for creation and reimagine its potential. The Garden Defense System doesn't just protect. It transforms hostile energy and matter into resources that can be used for construction, terraforming, or further defense." The chamber erupted in discussion as the implications became clear. Humanity hadn't just created a new weapon. They'd fundamentally changed the nature of space warfare. In a galaxy where most species focused on building bigger guns, humans had turned to the smallest forms of life for protection. As the council members debated, Zhang turned back to the window. The bacterial lattice had begun to pulse with new colors, its bioluminescence creating a spectacular light show against the backdrop of stars. It was beautiful, she thought, a reminder that even humanity's defensive innovations could bring wonder to the galaxy. Admiral, the Council President's voice cut through the chaos. I believe we need to discuss implementing this technology across Council space. Immediately, Zhang smiled. The demonstration had worked better than she'd hoped, but this was just the beginning. Wait until they saw what else humanity had been growing in their gardens of stars. 3 years earlier, Lunar Agricultural Research Station. Dr. Sarah Chen stared through the observation window at the failed experiment before her. The sealed chamber, designed to simulate deep space conditions, contained the remnants of what should have been a breakthrough in space-based agriculture. Instead, the bacterial colony she'd been cultivating had collapsed, leaving behind nothing but crystalline structures that sparkled under the harsh laboratory lights. Another failure, Dr. James Rodriguez asked, joining her at the window. The geneticist had been her partner on the Deep Space Food Security Project for the past 5 years. Not exactly, Sarah replied, pressing her hand against the cold glass. Look at the crystalline formation pattern. It's not random. She pointed to where the bacteria had died. They're forming lattices. The colonies are trying to protect themselves. James leaned closer, his eyes widening. You're right. They're creating physical barriers before they die. But why? The radiation levels weren't high enough to trigger this response. Sarah felt her pulse quicken as pieces of the puzzle began clicking into place. What if they're not just responding to radiation? What if they're responding to each other? She rushed to her console, pulling up data from the experiment. Look at these readings. The bacteria aren't just dying. They're sharing resources before they go. Sharing resources, James frowned. These are individual colonies. They shouldn't be capable of that level of cooperation. But what if we could make them cooperate? Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard. We've been trying to make them survive independently in space. But what if that's the wrong approach? What if they need to work together? The next 6 months became a blur of endless experimentation. Sarah and James worked around the clock, modifying the bacteria's genetic code to enhance their ability to form connections. They drew inspiration from Earth's most resilient life forms, tardigrades, deep-sea thermophiles, and ancient bacteria found in Antarctic ice. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: coral polyps. Sarah had been studying how coral colonies share resources and protect each other from environmental stress. By incorporating similar mechanisms into their bacteria, they created colonies that could form living networks in space. It's beautiful, Sarah whispered, watching their latest test through the chamber window. The bacterial colonies had formed an intricate web, glowing with soft bioluminescence as they shared nutrients and energy. Dr. Chen, a voice called from the monitoring station. You need to see this. One of their junior researchers, Kai Patel, was staring at his screen in disbelief. We were running standard radiation exposure tests on the new colonies, but, well, look. The data showed something unprecedented. The bacterial network wasn't just surviving radiation exposure. It was absorbing it, using the energy to strengthen its connections. This changes everything, James said quietly. Sarah, do you realize what we've created? She did. What had started as a project to grow food in space had evolved into something far more significant. These bacteria didn't just survive in hostile environments. They transformed them. Word of their discovery spread quickly through the scientific community. Within weeks, military observers began showing up at their lab. Sarah initially resisted the idea of weaponizing their research, but James helped her see the bigger picture. Think about it, he said during one of their late-night discussions. We created this to help life thrive in space. Using it for defense doesn't change that. It just protects the life that's already there. The military brought in new perspectives and resources. Admiral Zhang Wei, then a captain, was the first to truly grasp the potential of what they'd created. She worked closely with Sarah's team, helping them understand how their biological innovation could revolutionize space defense. "Most of our enemies expect us to fight fire with fire," Zhang had said. "They'll never expect us to fight fire with life itself." The project evolved rapidly. They discovered that the bacterial networks could process more than just radiation. They could break down almost any form of matter or energy they encountered, using it to fuel their growth. What had begun as a survival mechanism became a sophisticated defense system. Sarah stood in her lab one evening, watching their latest test through the chamber window. The bacterial lattice had grown more complex, more beautiful. It pulsed with colors that seemed to dance through space, each flash representing countless microscopic lives working in perfect harmony. "Having second thoughts?" James asked, joining her at the window. Sarah shook her head. "No, just thinking about how far we've come from trying to grow space tomatoes." She smiled. "Sometimes the best discoveries come from asking the wrong questions, or the right questions in the wrong way," James added. "Who would have thought the key to defending humanity would come from trying to feed it?" As they watched their creation pulse and grow, neither scientist could have predicted how their agricultural experiment would soon reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. The Garden Defense System, born from a failed attempt to grow food in space, would become humanity's greatest contribution to galactic security. And it all started with a simple question: how do we help life thrive in the void? The colony world of New Eden was supposed to be humanity's first successful deep space agricultural settlement. Instead, it became the testing ground for the most revolutionary defensive system in galactic history. Captain Maya Patil of the research vessel Demeter watched her sensor displays with growing concern. 3 unidentified ships had just dropped out of FTL at the edge of the system, their energy signatures unlike anything in human databases. "Dr. Chen," Maya called out to their civilian passenger, "I believe this would be an excellent time to deploy your system." Sarah Chen nodded grimly. She'd been aboard the Demeter for the past month, overseeing the installation of New Eden's planetary defense network. The Garden Defense System had never been tested against actual alien technology. Until now. Initiating deployment sequence, Sarah announced, her fingers dancing across the control panel. Releasing primary seed clusters. From the Demeter's specialized dispensers, clouds of microscopic particles began streaming into space. To the naked eye, they were barely visible, a slight shimmer against the stars. But Sarah knew each particle contained millions of her engineered bacteria, ready to activate at her command. The unknown vessels were approaching rapidly, their intentions becoming clear as they launched the first volley of energy weapons. Maya watched in fascination as the bacterial cloud responded. Just as in their tests, the particles began to glow and connect, forming a living barrier between the colony and the approaching threat. "First contact protocols," Maya's XO suggested half-heartedly. "I think they made their intentions clear," Maya replied. "Dr. Chen, how long until the network is fully formed?" 3 minutes to achieve optimal density, Sarah responded, her eyes fixed on the readouts. "But it's already capable of basic defense." As if to prove her point, the first enemy shots reached their position and vanished into the growing bacterial lattice. The alien ships paused their advance, clearly surprised by the unexpected defense. Their next attack was more concentrated, multiple beams converging on a single point in the bacterial network. Sarah allowed herself a small smile as she watched the network's response. "They're playing right into our hands," she murmured. "The network feeds on energy. The more they attack, the stronger it becomes." On the main viewer, the bacterial lattice had begun to pulse with increasingly brilliant colors. Each enemy shot was absorbed and processed, the energy used to accelerate the network's growth. The defending barrier was now clearly visible, a shimmering, ever-changing wall of light that stretched across the colony's approach vector. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer announced. "They're broadcasting on standard frequencies." The alien commander appeared on screen, its insectoid features contorted in what might have been confusion. "Unknown vessel, The translator rendered its clicks and whistles into English. Your defensive technology is unexpected. Identify its nature immediately. Maya glanced at Sarah, who gave a slight nod. This is Captain Maya Patil of the Earth research vessel Demeter. You have entered restricted space and opened fire without provocation. We are currently deploying a defensive system that will render your weapons useless. I suggest you withdraw. The alien commander's mandibles clicked rapidly. Impossible. Our scans detect only organic matter. No shield technology cold. Correct. Sarah cut in, stepping into view. What you're seeing is not a shield. It's life itself, adapted to protect life. Every shot you fire will only make it stronger. Even now, your energy weapons are feeding its growth. As if to emphasize her point, the bacterial network suddenly flared brilliantly. It had finished processing the absorbed energy from the initial attack, and new strands of the lattice were spreading rapidly through space, beginning to encircle the alien vessels. What are you doing? The alien commander demanded, a note of panic entering its translated voice. Nothing, Sarah replied calmly. The network is simply following its programming, protecting life by containing threats. The bacteria won't harm you unless you continue to attack. They'll simply prevent you from doing any damage. The alien ships attempted to retreat, but found themselves increasingly encased in the living lattice. Their engines flared as they tried to break free, but the energy output only fed the network's growth. You have two options, Maya stated firmly. Power down your weapons and engines and wait for escort out of the system, or continue resisting and become permanently enclosed in a bacterial containment field. Your choice. The standoff lasted another 10 minutes before the alien vessels powered down. As their energy signatures dimmed, the bacterial network relaxed its containment, though it maintained a protective barrier around them. Send word to Earth Command, Maya ordered. Tell them first contact has been established, and humanity's garden just proved its worth. Sarah watched the shimmering barrier of light, thinking of all the failed experiments that had led to this moment. They had created the system to protect life, and today it had done exactly that, without firing a single shot or taking a single life. Beautiful, isn't it? She said softly. Even in defense, it creates rather than destroys. Maya nodded, watching as escort ships began arriving to secure the alien vessels. The galaxy's about to change, isn't it? It already has, Sarah replied. They came expecting to find primitive colonists with conventional defenses. Instead, they found something they never imagined, a civilization that turns life itself into an impenetrable shield. The bacterial network continued to pulse gently in space, its bioluminescence painting the night with ever-changing patterns. Humanity's first line of defense had proven itself, not through superior firepower, but through the simple, unstoppable power of life adapting to protect life. High Command Center of the Meridian Empire. 6 months after the New Eden incident, Supreme Commander Vextal stared at the holographic display with all 4 of his eyes, mandibles twitching in barely contained frustration. The simulation had failed. Again. Run it once more, he ordered. Increased power output by 300%. His tactical officers exchanged worried glances but complied. The simulation flickered to life, showing the Meridian battle fleet engaging the human colony protected by their infamous garden defense system. Even with vastly increased weapon power, the result remained the same. The bacterial network simply absorbed the additional energy, growing stronger and more extensive. Impossible, Vextal chittered. There must be a way to overwhelm it. Sir, his chief scientist, Dr. Ixla, stepped forward. Perhaps we're approaching this from the wrong angle. Our traditional doctrine of overwhelming force isn't just failing. It's actively making their defense stronger. The Supreme Commander turned all 4 eyes toward her. Explain. The humans haven't just created a new technology. Ixla began, pulling up data from the New Eden encounter. They've created a new paradigm. Look at these readings. Every attack we launch doesn't just fail. It makes their position more secure. It's like trying to put out a fire by throwing fuel on it. Vextel's antennae twitched thoughtfully. In his 3 centuries of military service, he'd never encountered a defense system that turned attacks into advantages. The implications were staggering. "The Galactic Council is meeting next week to discuss this," he said quietly. "Many species are already calling for an alliance with Earth. They believe humanity's biological technology could revolutionize space travel, colonization, everything." "They're right," Ixlo replied. "I've been studying the limited data we have. The bacterial network doesn't just defend. It can process matter and energy at the molecular level. Imagine using that for asteroid mining, terraforming, or cleaning up space debris." The tactical display shifted to show recordings from other encounters. Multiple species had attempted to challenge human colonies in the past 6 months, and all had met the same fate. Their weapons, no matter how advanced, simply fed the ever-growing, ever-adapting bacterial shields. "There's something else," Ixla continued, highlighting a particular data stream. "The network appears to learn from each encounter. It's evolving. The bacteria share information across vast distances, adapting their responses based on collective experience." Vextel felt a sensation he hadn't experienced since his early days as a cadet: genuine awe. They've created a living defense system that spans their entire territory. "More than that," Ixla corrected. "They've created a system that gets stronger with every attack. The more the galaxy tries to test their defenses, the more impenetrable they become." A junior officer rushed into the command center, antenna quivering with excitement. "Supreme Commander, we just received word from our research division. They've managed to establish communication with some of the bacterial nodes." Vextel's mandibles clicked in surprise. "Communication? How?" "The bacteria respond to specific chemical signatures. Our scientists found they could initiate basic exchanges of information." "Sir, the network tried to teach us how to create our own defensive colonies." The command center fell silent. Vextel moved to the observation window, gazing out at the vast shipyards that had long been the pride of the Meridian Empire. Countless warships lay dormant, their energy weapons now proven obsolete by a species that had turned gardening into the ultimate defense. They're not just defending themselves, he realized. They're offering to share their protection with the galaxy. He turned back to his staff. "Prepare my ship. We leave for Earth immediately." "Sir," his tactical officer questioned, "the council meeting isn't for another week." "Exactly," Vextel replied. "I intend to arrive early. It's time the Meridian Empire acknowledged that the age of energy weapons and brute force is over. These humans, they've shown us a better way. They don't just adapt to survive. They help others adapt with them." As his staff rushed to comply with his orders, Vextel studied the tactical displays one last time. The simulated bacterial network pulsed with its characteristic bioluminescence, its pattern somehow both alien and beautiful. "Send word to the Emperor," he commanded. "Tell him that the greatest threat to our empire isn't human aggression. It's our own reluctance to embrace change. The humans haven't just created a defense system. They've created a bridge between species. And I, for one, intend to cross it." The message was sent, and with it, the Meridian Empire began its own adaptation. Soon, their vast shipyards would begin producing vessels designed not for war, but for cultivation. Ships that would help spread and maintain the living networks that were rapidly becoming the galaxy's new shield. The age of weapons was ending. The age of gardens had begun. Earth Diplomatic Center. 1 year after the New Eden incident, Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the botanical gardens of the newly constructed Galactic Cooperation Center, watching alien diplomats mingle with human scientists. Above them, visible through the transparent dome, streams of bioluminescent bacteria painted the night sky in shifting patterns of light. Earth's garden defense system now merged with similar networks developed by 24 other species. Still hard to believe, isn't it? Admiral John Wei joined her by the observation window. A year ago, we were worried about defending our colonies. Now we're teaching the galaxy how to grow their own living shields. Sarah smiled, watching a group of Meridian scientists examining a bacterial culture tank. Their species had become one of humanity's strongest allies, their vast biological research facilities now dedicated to expanding and improving the network. The latest numbers came in, John continued. Piracy in protected sectors is down 98%. No one wants to risk encountering the network. And the applications beyond defense. She gestured to where human and alien engineers were reviewing terraforming plans. We're reshaping dead worlds into gardens. A familiar figure approached, Supreme Commander Vextal of the Meridian Empire, now serving as the head of the Joint Species Development Council. Dr. Chen, he greeted, mandibles clicking respectfully. Your latest modifications to the bacterial communication protocols are extraordinary. The network's ability to share information across vast distances has improved exponentially. That was actually inspired by your species research, Sarah replied. Your understanding of chemical signaling helped us enhance the bacteria's ability to transmit complex data. The network isn't just our shield anymore. It's becoming a living information web connecting the entire galaxy. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden burst of color in the sky. The bacterial network had detected and absorbed a micrometeoroid, its energy signature rippling through the connected colonies in a cascade of bioluminescence. What had once been a defensive reaction had become a galaxy-wide warning system, alerting all species to potential threats. Dr. Chen, a young voice called out. Kai Patel, now heading his own research team, hurried over with a data tablet. The results from the Proxima Centauri experiment just came in. The bacterial colonies aren't just surviving in the star's corona. They're stabilizing it. We might be able to use the network to prevent stellar flares. Sarah felt a familiar thrill of discovery. Every week brought new applications for their living technology. What had started as a failed attempt to grow food in space had evolved into something that was fundamentally changing how species interacted with the cosmos. Your greatest contribution wasn't the technology itself, Vextal observed, his 4 eyes focused on the shimmering display above. It was showing us that the path to true security lies not in building stronger weapons, but in nurturing life itself. The gathering was called to attention as the council president took the central podium. The massive chamber fell silent as representatives from over 50 species turned to listen. 1 year ago, the president began. Humanity showed us that our fundamental approach to space travel, colonization, and defense was flawed. We sought to conquer the void with energy and metal. They taught us to fill it with life instead. He gestured to the visible network above. Today, we mark the completion of the first galaxy-wide living defense network. But more importantly, we celebrate a new understanding of our place in the cosmos. Sarah felt Zhang squeeze her shoulder gently. They had come so far from those first failed experiments in the lunar lab. The bacterial network pulsed overhead, each flash representing countless microscopic lives working in harmony to protect all forms of life, regardless of origin. The humans have a saying, Vextal addressed the gathering. The best gardens are those tended by many hands. Today, our species tend this cosmic garden together. As the celebration continued, Sarah found herself back at the observation window, watching new bacterial colonies being seeded in Earth orbit. Each cluster contained strains developed by different species, working together in perfect symbiosis. The network had become more than a defense system. It was a living symbol of cooperation, a bridge between civilizations. You know what the best part is? Zhang said softly, joining her at the window. We didn't just create a better defense system. We created a reason for species to work together. Every civilization that joins the network adds their own knowledge, their own adaptations. We're not just defending the galaxy, we're helping it grow. Above them, the bacterial lattice continued its eternal dance, processing energy and matter, sharing information, protecting life. It was no longer just humanity's garden. It belonged to all species who chose to nurture rather than destroy. The age of weapons had indeed ended, replaced not by an era of weakness, but by one of unprecedented strength. For in teaching the galaxy to grow gardens instead of armies, humanity had achieved what no amount of firepower ever could: true and lasting peace. In the void between stars, life bloomed, and the garden grew on.